Many people associate dementia with a final loss, with the feeling that something is disappearing irretrievably. Memories, orientation, personality. But what hardly anyone knows is this: dementia rarely begins suddenly, and it does not necessarily progress at the same speed. There are phases, there are directions, and there are influencing factors. Especially from the age of 50 onward, the brain changes in a very quiet way. Not dramatically, not overnight, but gradually. A thought takes a little longer. Concentration becomes fatigued more quickly. One feels mentally exhausted more easily. Many people accept this. Others suppress it. And almost always I hear the same sentence: "That's just part of getting older." I want to be very clear at this point. No, not everything we experience is simply age. My name is Dr. Angelina Stone. I have worked for many years with people from midlife onward and focus intensively on the biological processes that can influence the course of dementia. What I see again and again is this: the course is not a fixed itinerary. It is co-determined by blood circulation, by inflammation, by metabolic processes, and by everyday decisions. This does not mean that we can control everything, but it does mean that we are not powerless. One decisive point here is speed. Dementia is not a switch. It is a process. And processes can be slowed down if we understand early enough what drives them. One factor that is often underestimated in this context is the supply of energy and oxygen to the brain. The brain consumes more energy than any other organ in the body. At the same time, it reacts extremely sensitively to even the smallest disturbances in balance. Even mild circulation problems or chronic inflammation can have an influence in the long term. Not immediately, but steadily. At this point comes an important message that is very close to my heart. It is not about stopping dementia. It is about understanding its pace, because this is exactly where the key lies. If we cannot stop processes, we can often accompany them, and sometimes also slow them down. In recent years, research has begun to focus more intensively on natural substances that may influence precisely these mechanisms, not as medications, not as a replacement for therapy, but as supportive elements in everyday life. One of these combinations that repeatedly receives attention is green tea and lemon, not because they are exotic, but because their components act on multiple biological levels. But before we talk about how this combination may work, we need to clarify one thing: why the brain reacts particularly sensitively after the age of 50. And that is exactly what the next part is about. To understand why green tea and lemon can play a role in connection with the course of dementia, we need to go one step deeper, not in the direction of promises, but in the direction of biological processes. Because dementia does not arise from a single cause. It is the result of many processes that run in parallel over years. And precisely for this reason, its course cannot be explained or influenced by a single measure. A central factor in this context is communication between nerve cells. This communication is extremely energy dependent. It requires oxygen. It requires stable blood vessels. And it requires an environment with as little inflammation as possible. With increasing age, precisely these conditions gradually come under pressure. Let us begin with green tea. Green tea contains a special group of plant compounds, the so-called catechins. In research, one substance in particular is being studied intensively, EGCG. This substance is not a medication, and it is not a remedy either. But for years it has been associated with processes that are relevant to the aging brain, especially in connection with oxidative stress. Oxidative stress occurs when there is an imbalance in the body, when aggressive oxygen compounds form more quickly than they can be neutralized. The brain is particularly vulnerable to this condition, because nerve cells do not simply regenerate. They must be protected. Chronic oxidative stress can lead to nerve cells working more slowly, communicating less efficiently, and losing stability in the long term. Not abruptly, but gradually. This is where the interest in the components of green tea comes into play. Catechins are associated in a scientific context with antioxidant properties. This does not mean that they switch off oxidative stress, but they can help to support balance. And it is precisely this balance that is crucial when it comes to accompanying the course of degenerative processes. A second important aspect concerns inflammation. Many inflammations in the body are not acute. They cause no pain. They go unnoticed. These are referred to as chronic, silent inflammations. They play a special role in the brain because they can influence the blood-brain barrier and impair the supply of nerve cells. Here, too, studies show that certain components of green tea are associated with inflammation-modulating processes, not as a therapy, but as an accompanying influence. Now we come to a point that is often overlooked, the absorption of these substances. Because even the most interesting substances have no effect if they are not meaningfully available in the body. And this is exactly where lemon comes into play. Lemon is not only a source of vitamin C, it also influences the environment of the digestive system. Certain plant compounds are absorbed more effectively in a mildly acidic environment. This does not mean that lemon enhances anything, but it can create conditions under which certain substances remain more stable and more available. Especially with sensitive plant compounds, this context is crucial. Another aspect concerns blood circulation. The brain depends on constant, even blood flow. Even small impairments can have long-term consequences. Certain components of green tea are associated with supporting vascular function, not in the sense of a treatment, but in the sense of long-term accompaniment. In combination with a balanced diet and sufficient physical activity, this can be part of a more stable overall system. So why is the combination of green tea and lemon interesting? Not because of a single effect, but because of the overlap of several mechanisms, support of antioxidant balance, accompaniment of inflammatory processes, possible support of vascular function. Improved availability of plant compounds, none of these points is spectacular on its own. But dementia is not a spectacular process. It is slow. And precisely for that reason, slow, stable influences are relevant. A common misconception is to expect quick results. But the brain does not respond to short-term impulses. It responds to conditions that exist over a longer period of time. Natural combinations do not work like an intervention, but like an adjustment of the environment. And this can be decisive in the context of the course of dementia. When it comes to natural support for brain health, the wrong question is very often asked. Not, how can I meaningfully integrate this into my daily life? But rather, how much do I have to take and when will I notice something? This way of thinking is exactly what I want to consciously interrupt. Because especially with dementia, it is not about quick effects. It is about conditions, about regularity, and about patience. The combination of green tea and lemon is not an intervention. It is not something that is used selectively. It unfolds its potential benefit only when it becomes part of a stable, everyday routine, not as an obligation, not as a compulsion, but as a calm, recurring structure. The brain responds sensitively to repetition, not to intensity. A common mistake is to view natural approaches in isolation. People change nothing about their sleep. They remain under constant stress. They hardly move at all. And then they expect that a single combination can influence a complex process that has developed over many years. That is unrealistic. Brain health does not arise from a single element. It arises from an interaction: nutrition, movement, sleep, mental calm, and social stability. Natural combinations can be part of this system, but they do not replace it. Another common mistake is impatience. Many people try something for just a few days, perhaps a week, and if nothing changes in a noticeable way, it is discarded again. But when it comes to the brain, changes are rarely immediately perceptible. There is no clear signal, no distinct feeling. Instead, the underlying conditions change slowly. Often it is only noticed in retrospect, through greater mental stability, through less exhaustion, through more inner clarity. Another important point is timing. Over the course of the day, the brain goes through different phases of activity, phases of regeneration. Many processes that are crucial for memory and processing do not take place during mental strain, but in quiet moments. For this reason, it makes sense not to use natural routines as stimulants, not to wake up, but to support balance. Now there is a topic that is particularly important to me: caution. As much as I emphasize the value of natural substances, one thing must be stated clearly: not every combination is suitable for every person. People with sensitive stomachs, with known intolerances, with certain cardiovascular conditions, or with complex medication regimens should be attentive, not out of fear, but out of responsibility. Natural substances influence processes, even when they act gently. That is why this always applies. The body itself defines the framework. What repeatedly stands out to me in medical guidance is inner attitude. Anyone who uses natural support should not do so out of panic, not out of the fear of losing something, but out of the desire to preserve something. Orientation, independence, dignity. This attitude changes the relationship with one's own body and also with one's own aging. Perhaps this is the most important thought of this entire video series. Dementia is not a single moment. It is a path. And just as support is not a single step, it too is a path that consists of many small decisions. What we do every day, what we refrain from every day, and how consciously we deal with ourselves. Green tea and lemon are not a protective shield, but they can be part of a structure that offers the brain more favorable conditions. Not isolated, not overestimated, but embedded in a more conscious, calmer everyday life. If you take only one thought from this video, then please let it be this: you have influence. Not unlimited, not complete, but real. And this influence does not begin with fear. It begins with understanding. In the next videos, we will look at further connections, further combinations, further everyday decisions that can influence the course. Not to tell you what you must do, but to give you tools with which you can decide for yourself. Because that is exactly what health in older age is about.